On a clear winter morning in the Rockies, a family ski trip began like any other. Two siblings, fresh powder, one shared secret that would end in an emergency room. What started as a prank between brother and sister became a medical emergency. A fractured bone, hours of waiting, and a desperate plea, "Please don't tell Dad." This is the story of how one moment of sibling rivalry crossed a line, and the quiet decision that followed. I still remember the sound my leg made when it hit the ice. It wasn't dramatic. It was small, a sharp, clean crack that traveled up my body before the pain arrived. My sister was the first person to reach me. She looked at my twisted ski, then at my face, and the first words out of her mouth were not, "Are you okay?" They were, "Please don't tell Dad." The mountain that day was perfect. Blue sky, soft new snow, temperature just cold enough to keep the powder light. Our parents had already taken the higher chairlift. My sister and I were left on the intermediate run, the one we had ridden together since we were teenagers. She had been quiet that morning. Too quiet. I should have noticed. By the time the ski patrol arrived, my sister was already inventing the story we would tell. She said I had caught an edge on a patch of ice. She said it was bad luck. She never mentioned the binding she had loosened the night before while I was brushing my teeth. That detail stayed between us for years. This is a story about a ski prank that went too far, an emergency room visit that could have been avoided, and a sister who begged her brother not to tell their father the truth. It is told in the first person by the person who ended up on the hospital bed, with the distance of years and the clarity that only comes after the swelling has gone down and the cast has come off. My name is not important. What matters is the relationship. I am the older brother by 3 years. My sister, let's call her Elena for the purposes of this telling, was the younger one, the sharper one, the one who always needed to win even when no one was keeping score. We grew up in a house where competition was the background music. Board games turned into campaigns. Swimming races in the lake became personal Olympics. Skiing was simply the winter version of the same contest. Our father loved the mountains more than almost anything. He had taught both of us to ski before we could properly ride a bicycle. Every December, he planned the family trip with the seriousness other people reserved for business negotiations. The resort changed sometimes, Colorado one year, Utah another, once even British Columbia, but the ritual stayed the same. Early mornings, wax skis. The quiet pride when one of us linked clean turns down a steep face while he watched from above. Elena and I were 22 and 19 that winter, old enough to be considered adults, young enough to still care deeply about our father's opinion. The trip was to a mid-sized resort in the Colorado Rockies. Not the most famous mountain, but one with reliable snow and long intermediate runs that allowed us to ski together without constant separation. The night before the incident, we shared a room in the condo our parents had rented. I was tired from the drive and the first afternoon on the slopes. Elena was restless. She sat on the edge of her bed with my ski boots in her lap, turning them over as if examining them for defects. I asked her what she was doing. She said she was checking the fit. I believed her. I always did, more than I should have. What I did not know then was that she had already decided on the prank. It was not elaborate. It did not require special tools. She simply loosened the DN setting on my right binding, just enough that a moderate impact or an unexpected twist would release the ski prematurely. She had watched our father adjust bindings for years. She knew the numbers. She knew what just a little looked like. The next morning the sky was cloudless. Temperature around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The snow report called for 6 inches of new powder overnight. Perfect conditions. Our parents left early for a steeper area. Elena and I took the chairlift to the top of an intermediate trail called Blue Pine. The run was familiar. Wide, rolling, a few short pitches that required attention but nothing extreme. We dropped in together. I was slightly ahead, carving clean arcs, feeling the new snow under the edges. Elena stayed close behind. At a small roller near the middle of the run, I felt the right ski release. Not fully, just enough to twist my knee and send the ski tip catching in the soft snow. My body continued forward. The ski did not. There was a moment of weightlessness, then the hard stop as my lower leg rotated beyond its natural range. I heard the sound before I felt the pain. A distinct pop followed by a deeper, grinding sensation. I landed on my side, the unbound ski still attached to my boot by the safety strap, the other ski still locked in. For several seconds I could not move. The sky above me was the same clear blue it had been all morning. Snow crystals drifted past my goggles. Elena reached me first. She was breathing hard. She dropped to her knees in the snow and looked at my leg. The angle was wrong. Even through the ski pant I could see the unnatural bend just above the ankle. She said my name once. Then she said, "I'm so sorry." Then, almost immediately, "Please don't tell Dad." I was in too much pain to answer. Ski patrol arrived within minutes. They were professional, calm, efficient. They stabilized the leg with a vacuum splint, loaded me onto a toboggan, and began the long descent to the base clinic. Elena rode the chairlift down and met us there. She stayed with me while the clinic staff confirmed what we already suspected. The injury was beyond their scope. An ambulance would take me to the nearest hospital with an orthopedic specialist. 40 minutes away. In the ambulance, Elena sat on the bench opposite me. The paramedic monitored my vitals. Elena kept her voice low. She told me the story she had already prepared. I had hit a patch of ice that no one else had noticed. The ski had released normally. Bad luck. Nothing more. She repeated it as if practicing for an audience. Then she looked at me and said again, "Please don't tell Dad. He'll never let me hear the end of it. He'll think I'm still a kid. Please." I was given pain medication. The ride became hazy. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed a spiral fracture of the tibia and a partial tear of the deltoid ligament in the ankle. Surgery was scheduled for the following morning. A plate and screws. 6 weeks non-weight bearing. Physical therapy after that. The doctor was matter of fact. "These injuries happen on skis," he said, "especially when a binding releases at the wrong moment." Our parents arrived at the hospital that evening. Our father looked older than I had ever seen him. He asked the same questions the doctor had already answered. How did it happen? Was the binding set correctly? Had I been skiing beyond my ability? Elena answered for me when I was slow to speak. Ice. Unexpected. Nothing anyone could have done. Our mother held my hand and did not ask many questions. Our father kept returning to the binding. He wanted to examine the ski himself. Elena had already returned it to the rental shop and requested a different pair, claiming the old one was damaged in the fall. I did not correct her. Not that night. Not the next day after surgery. Not during the long drive home with my leg elevated in the back seat. The secret settled between us like a third passenger. In the weeks that followed, the fracture healed according to the expected timeline. The hardware remained in place. Physical therapy restored most of the range of motion. I returned to skiing the next season with a different pair of bindings and a more cautious approach to rollers. Elena and I never spoke about the loosened Diane setting again in any direct way. Sometimes, on later trips, she would glance at my skis while I was adjusting them and look away quickly. That was the closest we came to acknowledgement. Our father never learned the full story. He continued to plan the family trips. He continued to watch us from higher on the mountain. He continued to believe that the accident had been pure chance. Elena graduated, moved to another state for work, and eventually married. At family gatherings, the subject of that particular winter rarely came up. When it did, the official version was repeated without variation. Years later, I asked myself why I kept the silence. Part of the answer was simple loyalty. She was my sister. She had made a mistake that could have been far worse. Another part was the recognition that our father's regard mattered to both of us more than we usually admitted. Telling him would have permanently altered the way he looked at her. It would also have altered the way he looked at me for having protected the lie. There is no grand moral lesson in this account. A prank intended to create a moment of embarrassment or minor inconvenience instead produced a genuine injury. The person responsible asked for silence. The person injured granted it. The parent who would have been most affected never knew. Life continued. The mountain remained. The snow fell again the following winter and the winters after that. What remains is the memory of the sound the bone made, the expression on my sister's face when she realized what she had done, and the quiet persistence of a secret that outlasted the cast, the physical therapy, and many seasons of fresh snow. In the end, the story is not primarily about the fracture, or the emergency room, or even the prank itself. It is about the decision that followed, the choice to protect a sibling at the cost of complete honesty with a parent. That choice was made in a moment of pain and fear. It was maintained through recovery and beyond. Whether it was the right choice is a question each listener must answer for themselves. The facts are these: a binding was loosened, a leg was broken, a sister asked for silence, a brother gave it, and a father continued to believe in the version of events that allowed him to keep his uncomplicated pride in both of his children. This is how the day ended, and this is how the secret continued. To understand why a loosened binding carried such weight, it is necessary to understand the household in which Elena and I were raised. Our father had grown up in a small mountain town where skiing was not a luxury, but a seasonal occupation and a measure of competence. He carried that seriousness into parenthood. Lessons on the snow were never casual. Edge control, weight distribution, the precise moment to release release a turn. These were taught with the same attention he gave to car maintenance or financial planning. Praise was earned. Mistakes were noted. Elena absorbed the pressure differently than I did. Where I tended toward careful execution, she pushed harder, took more risks, and measured herself constantly against me. The 3-year age gap meant that for much of our childhood, I was simply stronger, taller, more experienced. She hated that fact. Birthday parties, report cards, even the height marks on the kitchen doorframe became points of comparison. Skiing intensified it because the mountain offered an objective scoreboard: who finished the run first, who held the better line, who received the approving nod from our father at the bottom. By the time we were young adults, the rivalry had softened into something more complicated: affection mixed with residual scorekeeping. We could laugh together. We could also still wound each other with small, precise gestures. The prank belonged to that latter category. It was meant to produce a harmless fall, a moment of snow in the face, perhaps a lost ski that I would have to hike back up for. Intent, however, does not always govern outcome. The condo was quiet after dinner. Our parents had gone to bed early, already planning the next day's route. Elena and I stayed up watching a movie neither of us particularly cared about. At some point she stood, walked to the gear closet, and brought out my skis. I asked what she was doing. She said the right binding felt slightly off during the afternoon runs. She wanted to check the DN. I was half asleep and trusted her. I had no reason not to. She had adjusted her own gear for years. I did not watch her hands. I did not notice the small tool she used. I only registered that she spent longer than necessary with the ski across her lap. When she returned it to the closet, she said everything looked fine. I accepted the statement and went to brush my teeth. That was the moment the prank was set in motion. A few turns of a screwdriver. A number moved from a safe setting to one that would release under moderate torque. The change was invisible once the ski was standing upright again. Morning light on snow has a particular quality in the high Rockies: hard, blue-white, almost metallic. We rode the chairlift in near silence. Elena made a joke about the previous day's slow lift line. I answered automatically. At the top we checked our boots, clicked into the bindings, and pushed off. The first few turns felt normal. The snow was soft enough to forgive small errors. Halfway down, on a gentle roller that I had taken 100 times before, the right ski released. The sensation was not of falling, but of the ground moving incorrectly beneath me. My body continued its intended arc. The ski did not. The resulting torque was concentrated on the lower leg. The fracture occurred in that isolated second. I remember the sky remaining perfectly still while everything below the waist became chaos. Elena's arrival, the ski patrol, the toboggan ride, the clinic, the ambulance, these followed in a sequence that felt both endless and compressed. Pain has a way of distorting time. What remains clear is her face when she first saw the angle of my leg, and the immediate priority she gave to the secret over my condition. The hospital was a regional facility accustomed to ski injuries. The orthopedist explained the x-rays with professional detachment. Spiral fracture of the distal tibia, partial deltoid ligament tear, open reduction and internal fixation recommended. I signed the consent forms. Elena stayed in the room while the anesthesiologist reviewed the plan. Our parents arrived after the first dose of medication had already taken effect. Elena delivered the ice patch version of events with convincing detail. Our father asked about the binding. She said the ski had released as designed. He accepted the answer, though I could see him turning the mechanics over in his mind. After surgery, I woke with a heavy cast and a surgical dressing. Elena was still there. She repeated the request one more time, quieter now. Please don't tell him. I nodded. The nod became a commitment that lasted years. Recovery is mostly waiting. Elevation, ice, medication schedules, physical therapy exercises that begin with the smallest movements. During those weeks, Elena called often. She asked about pain levels, about progress, about whether our father had asked more questions. He had not. The official story had settled. I thought frequently about the loosened binding, about the moment of decision on the mountain when I could have spoken and chose not to, about the way loyalty between siblings can sometimes require a quiet form of dishonesty toward parents. The silence was not dramatic. It simply continued, day after day, until it became the normal state of affairs. Time softens some edges and sharpens others. The leg healed. The hardware stayed. I returned to the sport with greater caution and better equipment. Elena and I maintained a close relationship, though the prank remained an unspoken reference point. On subsequent family trips, our father still watched watched us with the same pride. He never learned that one of the falls he attributed to chance had been engineered. Looking back, the episode reveals something ordinary and therefore easy to overlook: the small negotiations of family loyalty. A prank that exceeded its intended scale. An injury that required medical intervention. A request for protection. A decision to grant it. No one was permanently damaged in a life-altering way. The bone mended. The relationship between brother and sister continued. The father retained an uncomplicated view of his children. Whether that outcome justifies the silence is not a question this documentary answers. It only records that the silence was kept. Mountains do not keep records of the people who fall on them. Snow covers tracks. Wind erases the marks of toboggans and ski edges. What remains is memory, and memory is selective. I remember the sound of the fracture more clearly than the pain that followed. I remember my sister's face more clearly than the faces of the ski patrol. I remember the request for silence more clearly than any of the medical conversations that came after. This is the complete account as I am able to give it. A ski prank, an emergency room, a plea not to tell a father, and the years of quiet that followed. The cast came off. The physical therapy ended. The skis were replaced. The secret remained. Some stories are told immediately. Others are carried for years before they are spoken. This one was carried. It is offered now not as accusation or confession, but as record of a moment when a prank became an injury, and a sister's fear of her father's judgment outweighed everything else. The mountain is still there. The snow still falls. And the choice that was made on that clear winter day continues to shape the silence between the people who lived it.